So hello everybody and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. As usual, I'm your host Hannah Munro and with me today is Rob Clay. So Rob is the CFO of Modaxo and he's here to talk to us about a number of topics, one of which is programmatic M&A. So welcome Rob, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Hi Hannah, thank you. Yeah, and pleasure to be here. It's a bit out of my comfort zone and something to do, but that's healthy, so it's good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think it's always good sometimes to push the boat out, and I forget, I have so many of these conversations that actually for some people it's quite new. So thank you for taking the time. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Rob. How did you end up at Modaxo?
Yeah, so I started out working in manufacturing businesses. Always came through the SEMA routes. Always wanted to work in industry and work in a business rather than in the audit side. Enjoyed being part of businesses that were really making something and putting it out and serving a marketplace. And then came through a couple of businesses that were VC backed and PE backed, and had a bit of experience of what that world is like for good and for bad. And then got to a stage of life where we wanted to be in a geographic location for family reasons, and looking for a new role, and came across this the company Modaxo was part of a Canadian group, and hadn't really heard of them before, but the more I learned about them, the more interesting I found it, and it's been great. I've been there for nearly 17, 18 years now, so it's been challenging each year, and it's always been something different, and that's kept me engaged and interested and growing, I think.
And obviously we were talking about mergers and acquisitions, M&A. Tell us a little bit about how you think about mergers and acquisitions, and what are some of the key things that you think are important when putting together an M&A strategy?
Well, I think probably the first thing I would think about is what kind of M&A strategy you want to do. So I think almost any business would be open to M&A opportunities. Some would be on a more opportunistic or selective kind of basis. So if you've got a competitor that comes onto the market, or a complementary offering that you want to get into your umbrella and offer to your customers. What I've been experiencing with Modaxo, and is a little bit different, is a more programmatic M&A approach, where you're then saying, actually, M&A is going to be one central plank of the strategy, and is going to be something that we're looking to build up into a competence and be repeatable on an every year basis rather than an occasional basis. And I think that has quite a different implication in terms of how you set up and how you get organized and how you go about it. So I think deciding which of those routes suits your business is probably the number one thing.
So with the programmatic M&A, what sort of things do you need to have in place to make that successful? Because it's quite, taking on new businesses and integrating them can be quite challenging. So what are some of the things that you think about when putting that together?
So I think there's a couple of things for the business, and then for finance specifically. For the business side, it's mostly about getting organized and dedicating resources. Is probably the two kind of headlines, because you're trying to build something which is a core competence for the business. So the first you need is capacity. So management capacity, as much as anything. You're going to be having new businesses to look at on a regular basis, and then new businesses to integrate, assuming you're successful on a regular basis. And those are two very different activities. So getting organized around those, having dedicated resources specialized on the M&A sourcing and nurturing and transaction side of things. And then just as importantly, having the business set up ready for the integration. And we see integration in two strands. So you've got the organizational onboarding type integration activity, getting to know how the business operates and what your reporting deadlines are and what your chart of accounts looks like. But then there's also the working on the delivery levers for the business. So if you've got an investment thesis for the business, how are you actually going to make sure you deliver the returns that you said you would do? And those are separate strands of activity under the integration umbrella, both very important and both take dedicated resource to be successful. I would think on the M&A transaction side, the way we go about it is we try to be pretty systematic, like other companies that do. So we think about it a lot like we also think about a sales funnel. So we're thinking about identifying all the opportunity prospects out in the marketplace that we might be interested in, and then we're maintaining essentially a CRM type approach where we're proactively reaching out, making contact with each of those potential targets, and trying to build some knowledge on their side of who we are and what might be different about us, and then building some relationship and our understanding of their business so we can have a more meaningful conversation. Sometimes can go on over months and years on and off as we you're seeking to get to the right time, and then you're actively managing that sales funnel through each stage and introducing the right people at the right time to very much as you would with a sales process.
And that's quite interesting in that so when you're going through the assessment process, what are the key sort of aspects of assessment that you put forward? So obviously the financials are one part, but they're not the only part, are they, to that cycle?
No, I think it's very important to have a clear view of what you're looking for, what the strategic fit is. So we have a set of 5 questions that we ask, that we're looking for in our world. We're looking for specialized software and technology solutions that support public transport industry, and we're looking for a strong recurring revenue stream, and we're looking for mission critical software, and we're looking for a particular kind of profile of customer base, and that are long-standing, loyal, and ongoing investing type customers. So it doesn't. You could have very different criteria as long as you're clear what your criteria are, and then because you're no longer looking at one clear competitor and saying, okay, we'd love to add them. You're now looking out at the world and saying, okay, there are thousands of potential companies out there, and you need to have a robust filter and be able to be clear as to what it is you're looking for, and then recognize it when you see it and pursue it, and equally recognize if you get a conversation with somebody that's interesting but doesn't fit the strategy, then having the discipline to say thanks but no thanks.
And in terms of working with the team to do the assessment, how do you structure and what support do you have internally to go through the assessment process? Do you have a dedicated person that does this assessment, or do you involve the wider management team?
Yeah, we do a bit of both. So the first thing we do is we try to make sure we give the team the right tools. So having kind of set out a clear profile of the kind of targets we'd be interested in, we then have a fairly well laid out process that we're going through that says, okay, here's the qualification stage, here's an initial assessment. We call it a business quality questionnaire. That's 10 questions you could have in a 10-minute conversation with a business leader, and then we have a sort of a short form valuation model that's okay, with a limited amount of data that somebody might be able to prepare to share at an early stage, can we get to a sort of ballpark valuation and understand whether we're on the same page, and then a more detailed process as we're going on. So if you put all those tools in place, it's easier for the team to kind of follow that through and then say, okay, I know what I need for stage 1, and I know what stage 2 looks like, and I can describe that as well to the target we're talking to. That helps the team know what they're trying to do, and we definitely look to have dedicated resources that are working on this full time running the process, but they will also then involve business as we go along. Maybe initially on a fit question. So if you've got a profile that you're looking for, but you're looking at a business today, you're not quite sure whether it fits or not, then you need to be talking to the business early on to say, hey, how attractive is this target compared with the typical, and then also involving the business leader. Ideally, a business leader on our side to just talk to the business leader on the target side, so you get a real business to business conversation going on rather than just purely a numbers and valuation spreadsheet type conversation.
And at what point do you start connecting the dots between obviously the key different departments within your organization and the acquisition? Do you encourage that at an early stage, or do you do it rather later on?
Depends a bit on the target. Typically, confidentiality is obviously key, so there's a pretty limited tent of people involved, particularly early on. Generally, a target will want to know, is this a serious conversation? Who are you? What are you? What kind of numbers are we talking about before they want to start getting a lot of people involved? So that's that first touch point of business leader to business leader. If we get past that phase, and we'll have what we'd call an indicative offer, so we're putting some kind of number on the table and saying yes, there's enough here of interest to keep going, then we're bringing in a broader team in the diligence phase and getting more point to point contacts. And I think that's, you're knocking on that door anyway, and I think it's really important. There's the numbers get you so far, and you can spend all day in Excel, modeling something out. But relationships are super important in the process as well. Business leader to business leader, but also our finance director to their finance director, or and HR to HR. And as we go through, generally these are businesses. In our world, we actually acquire a number of businesses we never sell. So that means these are people that we're going to be working with for a long time, and having that relationship and understanding and a level of openness and honesty early on sets the right tone for them in saying, okay, yeah, this is an organization that I am not willing to be a part of, and that I can get behind this project. It's a lot of work for them as well as for us. So they've got to believe in the goal at the end of the journey that you're trying to go on together, and that can only be through relationship. And it's not our M&A guys. They're a part of that picture, but they're not carrying that on their own for sure.
And obviously, culturally, there might be some differences between yourself and the acquisition. How do you approach assessing culture and whether both the organisation but also the individuals are a good fit?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something we do, particularly because we're doing international acquisitions. So we've got national culture as well as business culture to get across. So we try to partner that up. So when we're doing, let's say if we're looking at a target in Germany, then ideally we'll have one of our German business leaders involved in the conversation, so they've got a better cultural meeting of minds and no language barrier and all of that. But even within any given country, you definitely got different cultural aspects of the business. I think probably the only thing we'd say is we don't shy away from them. So I think, we're talking to a business that clearly has a different culture in terms of, but there's not much point in us pretending that our culture is different to what it is, because again, we're looking to be in this relationship with the business for the long term. So that might improve our chance of getting the deal done, but it doesn't improve our chance of the deal being successful. So we would be pretty upfront and open about, okay, this is, this feels different on our side than we're seeing on your side. How are you seeing that? Is that just they're also potentially putting on a particular face to us. So sometimes they're kind of like, okay, well actually no, we're not usually this formal. We're just on our kind of best behavior because we haven't been through a process like this before, and that's okay. Well, we can all chill out and be less formal then. And sometimes it is a different approach to I don't know, accountability or delivering on numbers and things. And those are things that we do have to have a conversation about. And then they need to form a view as to whether that suits them. Right. So it's definitely a two-way process. It's important for us to identify whether it's a target that could really work for us, but it's also important for them to determine if we are the right investment partner for them for the business.
And you made an interesting point there about almost the initial perception is that they feel like they have to put on a particular front or particular way of working. Yeah. How do you as an organization get beneath the hood of their organization? Because sometimes what you get told isn't always what is actually there. So is there any particular top tips or ways that you approach things that have allowed you to unearth some challenges before you even get into the integration process?
Yeah, I think that can be particularly the case where we talk to a lot of smaller SME owner managed type businesses who therefore often haven't been through many of these processes, or maybe never, and so are slightly on edge or certainly out of their comfort zone in terms of what's going on. I think simple but obvious is face-to-face time. So we always try and get to meet with the business leader at least, and ideally a few of their team, and have some outside of a meeting room, so have dinner and have a chat, get to know each other. The conversation is often still around their business and our business and the culture and those differences, but it's much more engaging kind of environment than kind of death by PowerPoint and trying to present and polish numbers from one side or the other, and I think that's particularly, again, back to the cultural point, particularly in some parts of the world, particularly Southern Europe, for instance, you'd be unthinkable to do a deal without having met and had dinner and spent time together. But it adds, it helps the situation in any country, I think, and will be a big focus for us. And I think the other thing that we try to do is to reciprocate the transparency. So we have 1,000 questions about the business that we'd love to get through and ask, but we try to share information about our business as well and how we think, so that there's a feeling, okay, this isn't just an interrogation and a grilling. There's some give as well as some take, and be prepared to be vulnerable. We don't pretend that we've got everything right and that we're gonna bring perfection to bear on their business. We go through and we're pretty honest about where we have our challenges, and that often helps them, other people open up as to where they find challenges. And then I guess one other good tactic. One other tactic we do sometimes do is put the business leader of the target in touch with one of our other business unit leaders that is not part of the process, but has something in common. So maybe they're in the same country, or maybe they've got similar industry background or something, or if not, somebody of a similar size and complexity of business, and just have them to have a conversation. We don't sit in or monitor that conversation. We just say, have an honest conversation what it's like. You talk to this business leader was acquired by us 2 years ago. Talk to them about how it's really been, rather than how we tell you it's going to be, and they'll give you an honest view, because hopefully in 6 months' time you're going to be in their position. You're going to meet this individual at one of our events, and you're going to look them in the eye and say, hey, you told me it was going to be like this, this, and this. And so, it's an honest conversation that we think is the best way to be.
And we've talked a lot about obviously culture, and we've talked about obviously the financial side of things, but what about things like system and processes? How important is that to a programmatic approach? As in, how do you start to think about integrating systems, across different businesses? Because as you say, depending on the size of the organization, they may be at different levels of maturity in terms of systems and processes.
Yeah, it's a perennial challenge. And I think the way we approach is to try to determine which of our systems are really fundamental to what we're trying to do and be, and which systems can we be more flexible about. So we are part of a public listed Canadian group, so we have a bunch of reporting requirements and deadlines, often considerably more onerous and shorter turnaround than a target may have been used to. If they're in an owner managed environment, he can decide, they can take their time off if they want. So financial systems, people, HR, recruitment, and some of those core systems we standardize across all the businesses. In other systems, we take a much more best practice recommendation type approach. So when we think about CRM or some of those systems, we call it a network of peers. So if you join, there's another 50 or 100 people out there that you can reach out to and figure out and say, okay, what's it, we're looking at this particular tool. What would anybody recommend? What are the pros and cons? What are, for a business of my size and profile, can you point me to 5 people and I can talk to and get a sense of what they do? But we don't centrally dictate what solution they have to implement. We try to leverage and learn from each other and share setups or take advantage of buying power, but try not to dictate every last system within their business. If they've got something that's homegrown and works brilliantly for them and is well supported, then we don't want to break that just for the sake of standardization.
And that's a really interesting piece. So because sometimes that can happen, can't it? That you have to, part of the programmatic piece in order to scale, as like an assumption that you have to have pre-built systems that everybody comes onto. So why did you, as an organization, make that choice? Did you have a particular scenario where it didn't work, or has that always been your approach?
It's evolved a bit. So I think we started with an absolute minimum. So it's part of our DNA to be highly decentralized and as delegated authority as possible. So we try to have as few rules as possible centrally. So we really started with finance, systems and reporting as the one standard. We then found we needed tripped over some things, I guess, where we took on a larger, more complex acquisition, and then that organization hadn't got a very clear handle on their people cost and recruitment process and turnover and employee satisfaction. So we looked at that and said, okay, that does need to have a system, and we could entertain a couple of different alternative systems, but you need to have something in place. And then we had another project trying to look at sales funnel management, and again, we didn't limit everybody down to one, but we did kind of promote the importance of, and then sort of more sort of say, okay, you need to have a solution here, and here's a solution that we recommend. If you've got a particularly strong argument for doing it well another way, that's okay. Not doing it at all isn't an option, and then that's how we've kind of approached it usually.
And when you've gone through your assessment, obviously you guys have, you started to become more regular and more programmatic about what you're doing. What are some of the other learnings that you had as you've gone through the process? What do you wish you knew from the beginning?
So I think the level of specialization is within the roles is something we've learned more over time. So we have quite clear demarcation between different roles within the in the process, in terms of, we call it business development type roles, and then we'd call it execution type roles, so running a transaction once it's got a level of traction. And in the early days, we tried to have people follow a project all the way through, and I think that was attractive for the individual involved, who wanted to see the project all the way through, and had some merit for the target in being able to have a consistent point of contact through. But actually, you're asking quite different skill sets of different people through that time. And you were also, we tended to find, once you get into the later stages of any M&A transaction, it becomes all consuming and highly time consuming, and you get out the end of it and discover, okay, we haven't actually done any business development activity for 6 weeks because we've been buried in this. And now the mid stage of the funnel is empty because we haven't done anything for 6 weeks on that side. So we definitely got better at that side of things.
So dedicated resource, making sure you're clear on like designing your funnel almost, and that it's a continuous phase.
Yeah, and then trying to establish KPIs. So trying to understand, okay, how many targets out there can one business development person look after and keep in contact with effectively during in a year. And from those, if we've got 100 targets in a database, how many of those should we expect to turn into a real conversation? Of those, what should the conversion rate be? How long should it take to get from an initial conversation to getting some data, and how long should it take from at each stage? Often an M&A transaction can be hugely distracting for the target business, particularly. We've got specialized resources on our side to try and avoid that, but the target probably won't. So it's in nobody's interest to distract the leadership from running the business for 6 months while you go through an extended M&A process. So you tend to find that you come out the other end of it having a business that's lost momentum, and that's not to anyone's advantage. So trying to measure time frames and keep the momentum up and work through things quickly is been something we've definitely learned more about as we've done more transactions.
So you've talked about a lot of KPIs at the beginning and the assessment and the funnel management side. What about in terms of measuring the success of an acquisition? What KPIs do you use for that?
So ultimately, for us, we track all our investments on an IRR basis. So we're looking for an economic return. Often which within that, try to be flexible. So sometimes as you get on board with the business, you learn something about it that you didn't know during diligence, or a new opportunity comes up, or a new challenge within their industry that nobody anticipated, and you want to be able to grasp that opportunity and crack on. So we would never want to be in the position of saying, okay, well, that investment wasn't in the thesis, though, so we're not going to do it. If it's a good investment to grow and build the business, we'll still want to do it. So we try and be flexible, but the measure of the success of that then is in the IRR. In terms of then breaking that down, one of the joys of coming out at the end of programmatic M&A is we have a number of investments, so we have a lot of benchmarking capabilities. So we have an expanding kind of suite of KPIs that are specially dedicated or particularly helpful and relevant, we think, to our kind of software and technology type businesses, and we're able to analyze all of our businesses the same way and stack them up next to each other and allow the business leaders, give them quite a lot of visibility so they can then look and say, okay, here are 5 KPIs. You're doing really well in these 3, but you're struggling a bit on this one. And you can read across and say, okay, here are 3 other businesses that are doing really well where you're struggling, and why not go and talk with them and spend time with them on go through how they're achieving a better result on that particular KPI. Maybe the first one you might talk to and say, well, that's great for you, but it wouldn't work in my business. Another one you might say, well, okay, I wouldn't do what you're doing, but it does give me an idea. And the third one you might look and say, okay, well, that's genius. I'll steal that idea and implement it tomorrow. And then at the same time, hopefully, other businesses are contacting you on the areas where you're strong, and we try to promote that network of peers to get and so that everybody helps each other to learn, and that's an important part of our culture, I think, and easier for us to do because so many businesses have been acquired and come on board. They've all been through it, so they have some sympathy for the new business coming on, and a natural curiosity about what they're like and what they're doing well. So everybody's sort of predisposed to learn from each other and to support each other. So that works really well.
And from a obviously going through the process, you've talked a lot about people still being with you after you go through. How important is talent retention to your strategy?
Yeah, hugely important. Because we are buy and hold forever, so inevitably we'll have more businesses next year, and more businesses the year after, and more businesses the year after that. So that means, obvious logic, we're going to need more business leaders and more finance leaders and more of everything as we go forward. And often, not all, but a number of the businesses that we're investing in, might be owner managed businesses that are coming up for retirement, and so that's going to create a vacancy naturally, or we are having a leader coming on board that says, okay, I want to take the company international, but I don't really know how to do it, and I want your support to do it. And that means they're going to progress more in their role and start focusing on another market overseas or something. So then we need backfill for what they were doing yesterday in those hours. So that we try to retain as many leaders and promote from within as far as we humanly can, and we focus quite a lot of time and effort on leadership development, and we in the finance sphere, CPD and development of our finance team is super important to us, because we know we're going to need more finance leaders in 1, 2, 3, 5 years time. So
obviously that's important to you. How do you sort of because obviously there's very often a fear of change when you go through an acquisition, that you might, the individuals on the other side might feel like, oh, this is no longer where I want to be, etc. How do you mitigate that? And what's your sort of strategy if you're doing this over and over again? Do you have an onboarding program that you take new, acquisitions and employees through, or how does it work?
Yes, we do. That would take care of more of the the mechanical stuff in terms of how do your benefits going to work, and how do I claim my expenses, and all those kind of things. In the particular roles, the thing we've found probably most effective is kind of sharing that vision of the long-term growth and the opportunities in the business, and we do that best if we do that. So one of the things we do is we organise each year summits for each area. So we'll have a finance summit, we'll have a professional services summit, we'll have a development summit, and so on. And that allows individuals from each of the businesses to come together for a few days somewhere and spend time going through, which is partly about helping each other and learning from each other. But a big side benefit of that is for a newly acquired business, for somebody from there to go to that event opens their eyes to who we are and what the opportunities are, opens their eyes to, okay, I'm actually now part of an organization with 50 other businesses, and open them up to, okay, we also get them to talk to some of the individuals, and we have a lot of individuals that have progressed within the organization, and they can then sort of say, well, look, that's their story of development and progression. It can be your story as well in whatever flavor you want to put on it. So that helps people kind of get away from a concern that you're gonna, I don't know, consolidate all the jobs into the Philippines and fire everybody locally, or all those kind of those natural concerns. So it's people, how everybody's got a friend who's been through a horrible acquisition and and had a bad experience out of it. So it's we very natural for people to be concerned, curious, and we try to be aware of that and tackle it head on early on.
And obviously you mentioned some of the success, or maybe the horror stories that come out of M&A that everyone seems to talk about. But are there any, like, from your perspective, from in terms of design success and having this repeatable, is there anything else that you feel like you guys do differently so that you don't end up on that side of the conversation?
I think an advantage of doing the kind of programmatic approach, where you've got a number of conversations going on at any one point in time, is it's easier to be disciplined and dispassionate about any one opportunity. I think it must be very hard if you worked in a tightly fought industry, and a competitor, opportunity to acquire a competitor comes up, and there's only 3 real competitors in your industry. You must feel a lot of pressure to make it work and convince yourself that it's going to be a good deal and all those kind of things. And it's, I think, important for us to keep that one step back from that, and have so we work quite hard at different stage gate reviews, and to have people that are reviewing the investment case that have not been a part of writing it, because you do get, at whatever level, you get emotionally attached subconsciously, if not consciously, to a deal that you put a lot of time and effort into, and you want to see it go through, but it's not always the right thing to do, or if you come across issues during diligence, then you have to face up to them and have the hard conversations, and that can be hard to do with you've just been trying to build this relationship with the business for this time, and then you're like, okay, now I've got to move the goalposts on the deal because of what we found that maybe the target might have felt was obvious and we didn't, or whatever the situation is. So I think having that one level up review and as dispassionate an eye as you can is really important. And finance can play a huge role there, right? We're really good at being seeing both sides of any question and doing the analysis and bringing data to bear rather than just a hunch or an inclination. So if you're trying to understand what the real growth prospects are, we're good at then sort of saying, okay, well, give me the data on all the prospects out there, and and I can apply filtering and probability and some realism to what it is, and crunch some numbers to come up with some analysis that even if it's wrong, tell me why it's wrong, and we'll all learn better, more and end up in a more informed place afterwards. And it's really fun. I like seeing we work hard at developing finance people. I think you've talked in a couple of your episodes where you're trying to get finance to move away from just reporting and into being a business unit partner, whatever that means. And in our world, that's very important in terms of getting them to understand their business and write a commentary on it, as opposed to just produce the numbers. Tell me what the story is behind. And if you can develop those skills, then you can take those skills and apply them to look at another business that you don't know as well, and it's actually a hugely valuable skill set to build, and really interesting for the individual as well to then kind of say, okay, well, I've been in this business for 20 years, I've just been acquired into Modaxo. Now I'm getting asked to cast an eye over a potential target for us, and I'm getting to look at a entirely different business that makes me think again about my business, because they do things differently and they still succeed. And is that better than my way or worse than my way, and or just different? And trying to think through all those things is finance can add I think a lot of value to that.
And that's a really interesting perspective, and I love the fact that it's a mix of, yes, you've got to have the culture, you've got to have the buy-in individually, it sounds like, to the deal from both sides, but actually there's this kind of emotion, you're taking the emotion away from the conversation, and that conscious bias one way or the other to really assess whether it is the right fit from a numbers perspective.
Yeah, and you can even be clear-eyed about a problem, right? So you might look at it and say, okay, our culture is completely at odds, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't go ahead, but you have to be super realistic about what that means, right? And that means we're going to have to there's going to have to be more time, FaceTime, real on site with the team, talking to them about why you do things differently, and persuading them of the case to approach things differently. Maybe you need a different absolute leader at the top of the organization to change the tone. Maybe it's more conversational and educational through, but it'll inevitably it's harder work to do, and that's fine. We're not frightened of hard work, but you need to build that into your model to say, okay, yeah, this is not going to become just like us in 6 months. This is going to be a longer process, and that's back to the kind of clear-eyed realism. That's a good thing, and often finance can have the kind of corporate memories, so they kind of say, well, remember we did one of these like 3 years ago, and this was what it was like, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, and let's not kid ourselves that this time it's going to be hugely different, and that's just being it's the cool rationality that you're trying to look for, I think.
I love that. And I'm very conscious of time. So, and this has actually been really interesting to talk about. And I feel like I've got lots of questions, right? But in order to stick to both of our timetables. So, from your perspective, what do you think are the key things that you need to have as an organization to make programmatic M&A a success?
So I think the key things are to have a clear strategy. So what is it you're trying to do? Just to say, okay, I just want to go out and acquire anything I can there are businesses that do that. So, if that's your strategy, that's fine, but you probably want to narrow it a bit more than that and try to be as clear as possible about what it is, and keep refining that, because you'll then you give that kind of spec to a team, and they'll go off and say, okay, I found this, and they say, well, no, that doesn't, I don't like that one. Well, okay, you need to tell me why, because it meets the spec you wrote, and it's, but it didn't meet the spec that I had in my head, and then you've got to put those two together and improve them. And then I think it is a resourcing question. So I think there's a lot to be said for giving people the opportunity to step up. We do that quite a bit because we have a reasonably well established process. We can, it happened to me for sure. I got thrown into international integrations and all these things I had no real experience of, and it was a great growing experience for me. We want to provide those opportunities for people, but they will need time and hours to do it. So again, being realistic about the size of the task, and not sort of saying, okay, yeah, you need to carry on doing your day job, but also do this in your spare time may not be a recipe for success. So and then I think there's a level of realism and candor as you go through. So we try to have a significant review 6 months in, that is about, okay, how is it going? How has it been for you? How have we done in terms of integrating with you, and how helpful has that been? How are we doing against the goals and things that we set? And it's a kind of a bit of a radical candor type conversation where we just say, hey, if we're causing you a problem, let's say so, because we still have time to fix it. If so, or if I wait for a year or longer, then it'll be too late. So that allows you to course correct and change direction, whatever the issue arising is. So at least you have a chance. So.
No, that's some brilliant tips. And radical candor, was that is it Kim Scott, the author of that? I happen to be a fan as well, so that's a cracking read and recommendation for anyone that's listening. So thank you so much, Rob, for taking the time. It sounds like you guys are not only nailing that programmatic, but it sounds like there's some constant improvements and tweaking to the process. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge and insight with us today. If people want to learn more about Modaxo, what you guys do, and a bit more about the business, where can they find you? What's the best place to learn more?
Yeah, it's start on the web. So we're www.modaxo.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. So by all means, look me up and find me. Definitely, to your point, we're definitely much more in the ongoing improvement and phase than in the nailing it phase. I think we definitely every transaction, every investment is a learning process for sure. But I think we set out trying to do our best for us and for the target, and that's probably important as well.
Yeah, building a win-win for everybody is definitely the way to go. So I want to say thank you very much to yourself, Rob, for joining us, and to our listeners. If there is a question I should have asked, an area I should have delved deeper into, and some more information that you would like about programmatic M&A particularly, then please do reach out. My contact information is on LinkedIn. I want to say thank you to ITAS for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you very much to Rob. Thank you for joining me and sharing your insight.
Thank you. It's been great. I enjoyed it.